Presidential Council Rashad Al Alimi and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discuss peace efforts in Riyadh. UN envoy Hans Grunberg doubles diplomatic efforts to push for political settlement in the country. Displaced families in Lahj province continue to face dire humanitarian situation. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fuad. Secretary Blinken welcomed the Presidential Leadership Council's continued support for UN-led peace process and for measures to bring immediate relief.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken met today with Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council President Rashad Al Alimi in Riyadh to discuss shared commitment to resolving the Yemeni conflict and mitigating the humanitarian and economic crises facing the country. Secretary Blinken welcomed continued PLC support for the UN peace efforts and for measures to bring immediate relief to Yemenis, while expressing concern with Houthi actions that are cutting off Yemenis from much-needed resources, including efforts to impede the flow of goods inside of Yemen. Secretary Blinken reaffirmed the important role of the PLC and the need for unity at this critical time. The Secretary emphasized that the parties must seize this unprecedented opportunity for peace and come together to reach a new, more comprehensive agreement to end the war. During a meeting in Riyadh with the President of the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council, Rashad Al Alimi, Blinken said parties to the conflict in the country must come together to reach a new, more comprehensive agreement. He also reiterated that a UN-led peace process will give Yemenis the opportunity to address critical questions facing the country, durably resolve the conflict, and chart a brighter future for Yemen. The conflict in Yemen has started in early 2014. When the Houthi militia seized control of Saada province in the north of the country and then captured the nation's capital Sana'a, forcing President Hadi to flee abroad. In August 2015, coalition ground troops landed in the port city of Aden and drove the Houthis out of the south of Yemen. However, they could not dislodge them from Sana'a or the north of the country. Fighting escalated in March this year across the province, forcing thousands of people to flee their homes. The UN says that tens of thousands of people in Yemen are currently living in famine-like conditions, while some 6 million people are on the verge of famine.
Hans Grunberg, the UN envoy to Yemen, concluded off a series of high-level discussions in Riyadh and Muscat with Yemeni parties and ambassadors in anticipation of the results of Saudi Arabia and Oman joint efforts. This report has more details.
Hans Grunberg, the UN Special Envoy to Yemen, concluded off a series of high-level discussions in Riyadh and Muscat with Yemeni parties and ambassadors from the UN Security Council's 5 permanent members. During these discussions, Grunberg emphasized that his office is carefully developing an array of viewpoints and ideas in anticipation of the results of Saudi Arabia and Oman's joint efforts. Grunberg stated that efforts are aimed at reaching an agreement on steps to improve living circumstances, implementing a statewide ceasefire, and initiating a thorough UN-backed process for a durable peace transition. On Monday, the UN envoy visited the Omani capital, Muscat, where he met with senior Omani officials and held discussions with the chief Houthi negotiator, Mohammed Abdul Salam. They explored ways to advance the ongoing peace efforts. Grunberg's visit came after a series of multiple meetings held by the UN envoy in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. According to the envoy's statement, these meetings were devoted to discussing ways to achieve a consensus on measures to improve living conditions, implement a nationwide ceasefire, and initiate a comprehensive UN-backed process for a sustainable peace transition in Yemen. Grunberg also met with Saudi Ambassador to Yemen, Mohammed Al-Jaber, as well as ambassadors from the UN Security Council's 5 permanent members to discuss methods to guarantee unified regional and international support for the United Nations-led mediation efforts. Furthermore, Grunberg met with Yemeni House of Representatives Speaker Sultan Al-Barakani and presented the efforts and communications he made during his visits to countries involved in the region, including the United States and China. He stated that despite the highly complex Yemeni crisis, the United Nations remains committed to achieving comprehensive political solutions that serve the Yemeni people, preserve the lives, security, stability, unity, and territorial integrity of its citizens.
The American Center for Justice announced that it will launch its new report on the annual summer centers held by Houthi militia. The center said that the date is next Sunday, June 11, 2023, with the launch of the new report of the violence and hatred industry. The report will deal with the summer centers that the Houthi militia has been organizing in recent years during the summer vacation period for school children. The Houthi militia loyal to Iran launched a missile attack on populated villages between the governorates of Taiz and Al Hudaydah. Local sources stated that the militia targeted the village of Makbana district west of Taiz with 3 rocket-propelled grenades at separate times during the daytime hours. The sources pointed out that the bombing caused fear and panic among the people, especially women and children, and forced farmers to leave their jobs. Heavy rain south of Socotra caused severe damage to residential neighborhoods, power outages, and damage to the agricultural sector. A committee headed by the deputy governor of the province began to go to the areas to see the conditions of the citizens and the extent of the damage. The deputy governor said that they will start a relief operation for those affected and conduct urgent interventions to lift the siege on the affected areas. Two fires broke out in 2 houses separated from each other in the center of the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. Local sources confirmed that the fire broke out in a citizen's house on Airport Street next to the Ministry of Electricity as a result of an electric short circuit. According to the sources, the flames quickly spread to parts of the other rooms and the monsters of the house as a result of it devouring the entire contents of the room. Dozens of displaced families are experiencing great suffering as a result of their forcible displacement from Al Anad camp in Lahj. On the other hand, these families sleep in the open and suffer from an acute shortage of food, medicine, and drinking water. This report has more details.
Many families spend their time searching for shelter and food. They have nowhere to dwell after being evicted from their homes due to the landowner forcibly relocated dozens of households in Al Anad neighborhood of Lahj Governorate to the middle of the desert. Among them, refugees from Taiz Governorate. One of them has cancer. He shares his bed with his kids in the middle of the desert. He is searching for a shelter to keep his family safe from snake bites at night and during the hot weather.
I am displaced from Al Rahida area and suffer from leukemia and spleen cancer. I have 2 children who are hearing impaired and 4 girls. We live in the open now. I hope that you will save us from this situation. We are now homeless and hungry, and they evacuated us and our children by force out of our camp. We ask you to have pity on our situation, and the women are crying from hunger, homelessness, heat, mosquitoes, snakes, and scorpions.
A displaced woman was also compelled to move to Al Anad region 5 years ago. She was relocated close to the camp along with numerous other families.
We were sitting on a piece of land. Then the landowner came and asked us to leave. He gave us a 2-day notice period before he smashed our tents and our belongings. Now we have moved to this place without tents, bed mattresses, or food.
Families who have been forcibly uprooted from their homes and whose lives are in danger because they are sleeping near reptiles risk becoming immortal at the cost of their lives, plus being unable to get a decent meal. The camp's director says that several families were forcibly removed from the camp and placed somewhere else, while the other families were allowed to stay where they used to pay. The outcome of the issue is to locate the displaced in another site inside the same camp.
The displaced were forcibly released after the end of the 5-year agreement, in which the landowner demolished the tents and prevented them from taking any furniture.
Families here struggle with 2 issues, the drought and the lack of access to food, water and medical care. Besides, the epidemics and infections affect women and children more frequently.
Coming next. Yemen's central bank denies depletion of foreign currency reserves. Welcome back. The Specialized Hospital for Ophthalmology in Ma'rib concluded the Visiting Doctors Program for Surgical Intervention. The Deputy Governor was briefed on the results of the Visiting Program's doctor, who provided a medical examination for 100 pathological cases, while 30 other cases were referred to Mecca Hospital in the interim capital Aden to undergo major surgeries on the retina, vitreous, and eye sugar. The Minister of Planning discussed in the U.S. capital, Washington, mobilizing resources to support Yemen in light of the current difficult circumstances. This came to participate in achieving stability in the desired economic recovery and expanding the scope of its interventions. He affirmed the government's commitment to its duties in continuing to pay the salaries of state employees and achieving economic stability despite the challenges and difficulties. The Minister of Finance discussed in the Jordanian capital Amman with the Director of the World Bank in Yemen efforts to strengthen economic conditions. The Minister pointed to the negative effects and huge losses faced by the public finances as a result of the Houthi militia's targeting of crude oil export ports and its commitment to paying employees' salaries. The Governor of the Central Bank chaired the meeting of the heads of boards of directors of Yemeni banks in the Jordanian capital Amman. The Governor affirmed that the Central Bank's readiness to help Yemeni banks overcome challenges and obstacles that threaten the integrity and stability of the banking system. Yemen's central bank has sufficient foreign reserves outside the country to fulfill its needs for hard currency and payments for imports. This report has more details.
Yemen's central bank has sufficient foreign reserves outside the country to fulfill its needs for hard currency and payments for imports. The bank rejected media reports that its reserves had fallen below $200 million and said that despite the suspension of crude exports, it had sufficient funds to meet demands and stabilize the national currency. The reserves were held in a number of international banks and were sufficient for it to carry out its duties. It added that it will continue to hold weekly foreign exchange auctions to cover a portion of the market's foreign currency requirements for imports of basic and essential materials through a transparent and competitive mechanism. Concerns were raised after representatives from the International Monetary Fund said that Houthi attacks on oil facilities in government-controlled Hadramaut and Shabwa has reduced the country's primary source of foreign currency revenue by more than 50%, which along with the rise in global oil prices would increase its fiscal deficit to 2.5% of GDP in 2022. According to sources, without a resumption of oil exports, the deficit is expected to widen further in 2023, despite cuts in much-needed expenditures. The mission encouraged the authorities to maintain this welcome reform momentum, including to push forward reforms in the electricity sector to reduce cost and increase revenue collection. Despite the central bank's upbeat statement, the Yemeni rial on Thursday fell to a new low of 1,350 to the US dollar from 1,200 a month ago. The currency began falling late last month, probably due to the stalemate in international diplomatic efforts to achieve a deal between Yemen's warring factions. The
Yemeni government called on international donors to mobilize more support and funds for development projects. The Minister of Social Affairs stressed before the 111th session of the International Labour Conference held in the Swiss city of Geneva the importance of donors and international partners supporting the government's efforts in addressing labour issues, alleviating unemployment, and supporting and financing development programs and projects. here is a reminder of the main headlines. Head of Presidential Council Rashad Al-Alimi and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discuss peace efforts in Riyadh. UN envoy Hans Grunberg doubles diplomatic efforts to push for political settlement in the country. Displaced families in Lahj province continue to face dire humanitarian situation. This is the end of the news at 1 See you soon.